Australian companies often score well in various ratings of corporate social responsibility, but just how accurate are the results? An initiative out of London's decided it's time to rate the ratings organisations. Peter Shergold, tell us what's going on.
Well, this is really interesting because I think just about every episode we've done, we've noted how a company has done in the ratings. Now what's happened is Sustainability, an organisation headquartered in London, have come in and they've looked at the raters themselves. The extraordinary thing is they've looked at 108 ratings. What's interesting, there were only 20 such ratings 10 years ago. And what it's looked at is things like the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, the FTSE for Good Index, the Newsweek's Green Rankings, and say, well, how good are these? How useful? What it actually finds is that companies tend to do better on the basis, really, of how well they report, rather than their actual performance.
Yeah, and I understand that sustainability experts weren't actually that impressed with kind of the overall level of the accuracy in the ratings and the rankings.
Well, that's right. So Sustainability looked at the ratings, then it got 1,200 experts on sustainability together and said, well, who do you trust in telling you how companies are going on sustainability? 52% of them had high levels of trust in NGOs, non-government organisations. 48% believe the company employees. Actually, only 42% believe the ratings agencies. I should say, the worst of all, only 13% of the experts believe government.
So that's the bar you've got to beat, which, yeah, that's very low indeed. Now, there's also some more positive news coming out of the UK. On this program on social business, Peter and I have often talked about how hard it is to get investors to provide the capital needed for social businesses. Well, now we've had the launch of social impact bonds. The bonds are an extraordinarily innovative way of capturing private finance in order to create social benefit. Peter, I found this fascinating. Just tell us how they work. You kind of got to get your head around it. It's very new.
No, it's really interesting. They're called social impact bonds, but actually they're not giving a fixed return to investors. In fact, the whole basis on which they work is that investors get variable dividends according to performance, and we're talking social performance here. So the aim is that socially responsible investors, who in the past may have invested their money in private sector companies, now have the opportunity to invest in social enterprises doing social good and actually getting a return on the investment that they make.
I mean, people would say that that sounds like the start of a financial revolution. It's in its kind of early stages, though. We haven't got it here in Australia. There's a kind of a test case, would you call it, happening in the UK?
Well, oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the things is we could talk about this and it can seem all airy-fairy. What's nice in the United Kingdom is that we've now got an instance of social impact bonds being used. Now, what we know, for example, is that prisoners who reoffend cost a huge amount of money. The estimate is, even if you look at the short-term offenders in the UK, the cost of them reoffending is more than 600 million Australian dollars a year. Big money. So we know that there are not-for-profit organisations who work with ex-prisoners, who give them education, skills training, support to try and get them back into society and stop them reoffending. Now, what's going to happen, there's social impact bonds, which investors can invest in, and essentially you've got a benchmark. If the activities of the social enterprise actually reduce the level of reoffending, if, for example, they bring down reoffending by 10%, then those who've invested in the bonds will get a 7.5% return. If, in fact, the rates of reoffending come down more, they get more. The crunch is, if, in fact, the activities do not bring down the rate of reoffending, you do your dough. It's a genuine investment in getting a measurable social return.
And if they actually manage to show that it works and that it is kind of like comparable to other investments.
It's looking at Peterborough in the UK. It's taking 3,000 prisoners and it's going to measure what the rates of reoffending are. If they drop between what would have been expected, then those who've invested in their bonds will get a return on that improved performance.
So Peterborough in the UK, that's kind of where everyone's watching now, but it could be extended to a whole lot of areas.
Look, you could see how you could extend this for getting people into employment, getting Aboriginal or long-term unemployed into employment. You could apply it to childcare. There's a whole series of ways you could apply this. What's interesting, I'm just getting a sense now that Australian governments, Commonwealth and state governments, are watching this with real interest to see if a similar financial vehicle could be used here in Australia.
Because for the government, it's about savings in a lot of ways, the way they bring in these private investors, right?
Well, that's right.
In terms of budgetary constraints.
You're getting public savings through social innovation. And what you're saying to people is if you're willing to invest in this, not give it to it as a philanthropist, but invest in this, and if it's successful, then you should share in the social value that's created, in the savings that accrue to government.
Good stuff. Now, I want to bring it back here to Australia as well. There's another group of social businesses all getting together, and it's about reducing the huge cost of waste, which kind of relates back to something we did in a couple of programs
Do you remember
ago.
we talked to that company in Wollongong run by, I think it was the Salvation Army, called Soft Landings, where we were amazed at how much landfill's taken up with mattresses and recycling, a recycling company that's got up to employ Indigenous people. Well, what's happening, there's more than 50 of these recycling enterprises in Australia. They're setting up now a community recycling network, and the aim is to do three things: reduce waste, obviously, provide employment and jobs, and build social inclusion. So that's being launched, I think, this month.